I see their faces and it's awesome. Thanks, Chris.
I'm Judy Kim. I started this week in faculty in psychology.
Welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Pa. I'm in the economics department in CAS. I also just started teaching this.
What department did you say?
Economics.
Oh, great. Awesome. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Rita Jalali. I'm in this Department of Sociology and I'm Senior Scholar in Residence.
So congratulations. It's wonderful.
Wendy Malillo, School of Communication. I'm the Journalism Division Director.
Great. Hi, Wendy. We've communicated by email a million times too. Great.
I'm Mika Polanco. I just joined the anthropology department and I've been out of the classroom for 8 years. So I feel like there's a big learning curve on the AI front. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Welcome. Sonia Walty, School of Public Affairs. And I teach graduate students in May. To her point about AI, be an AI fellow in SPA, and then some faculty associate in AI with Center for Faculty Excellence. So I really know more on AI.
More hats. Thanks, Sonia.
Margaret Johnson, I'm in the TESOL department. I teach academic English to international graduate students.
Great. Thanks.
I'm Allison's neighbor in Hearst. So I have 2 long-term homes, the Center for Faculty Excellence and the Department of Government, where I teach comparative colleges.
Sana. Kelly.
Kelly Joyner, Director of the Writing Studies Program. I think I've been in every single session with Sonia and Mika.
Yeah, we have meetings, huh? I love that. It's great. Karan.
Hi, yes, Karan Martinez. I was 8 years in CAS, Kelly and Allison, and now I've been 8 years at Koga.
Thanks, Karan. And I know you. I never see you in person anymore. Hi. Can you just tell us what your name is and where you are at AU?
Sure. I'm Molly Dendero in the sociology department.
Great. Expert in academic integrity. Those of you just arriving, just your name and where you live at AU, where your home is at AU. Catherine, you want to go?
I'm Catherine, right? And I'm at the library.
Thank you. And
Hi, Alita Anderson. I'm in School of Education.
great. Maybe I saw you this morning. Did I? Visited with some of your colleagues.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on this. I don't even know what it's like outside kind of afternoon, but thank you for taking time this afternoon to be here. I'm Allison Thomas. My email address is right there, athomas@american.edu. I hope if you remember nothing else from today's session, it's that if you have a question or a concern, you can email that address and be like, help me, and I will help you in any way I can. It can be about academic integrity, but it can be about something else. That doesn't mean like I can solve all the problems, but I've been at AU for a while, and so I feel like I could maybe say, oh, maybe you should talk to that person, or maybe I can help you this way. So I want to offer that, especially for those of you who are new, but also I want to remind you that if you have academic integrity related concerns, the best thing to do before you try anything is we're here. You can contact us. I'll also include later in the slides the generic email from my office. I work with a wonderful team of folks that can also answer questions about this too. So I'm the Assistant Dean for Academic Integrity, but also my home at AU for a really long time. This will be my 19th year here, which is in the College of Arts and Sciences. I teach in the writing program, I taught in the American Studies program, I taught creative writing. And I've been wearing academic integrity hats since 2015. And so that's been like a lot of research and a lot of on the ground kind of interaction with students and faculty about academic integrity concerns. And then my life changed pretty dramatically in spring 2023 when generative AI came into the mainstream, as in like our students started, did I say spring 2023? Yeah, when our students sort of started using it. And I remember very vividly like the first concerns from faculty, the first cases that I saw. And that really launched me into research and just thinking and conversations with colleagues across our community, but across higher ed about generative AI and its place in education and its place in the classroom and its place in writing and all of these questions. So I appreciate that. I know I've talked with many of you about this because I spend a lot of my time thinking about it. I don't have all the answers, but I do want to offer you, this isn't really like a workshop format. Like, I want this to be a chance for you to learn some of the things that happened in the Office of Academic Integrity last year. I don't know if others have served, I'm pointing at Molly because Molly has served a number of times on Academic Integrity Code panels, which review cases of potential code violations. And so faculty, if anybody's here that wants to get involved in that, you know my email address already, please let me know. It's a really instructive experience. It's interesting and challenging work. It involves working with colleagues and students. All panels are 2 faculty members and 1 student. And so there's a kind of conversation that happens about like, what are we looking at, what happens here? And so I would say the other resource you have that you may not know about, besides like me, now you know me, is you may have colleagues in your department that are resources for you. And Molly, actually, I feel like we've talked about this before, that like, once your colleagues kind of know you've done this work, they're like, oh, can I ask you about? And I love that. It feels like evangelizing in the best way because it's from the experience that you've had. And so I want to sort of note that those folks are out there too. This is a QR code for the slides. If you prefer to access them on a device closer to you, or really if you want to hang on to them and look at them later. I'm really thinking in 2 ways when I make slides. I'm thinking about what's going to happen in here, but I'm also sort of thinking about you in the future when you're like, I went to 5 sessions, it's really hot out, I'm not ready to make my syllabus until Monday or something, you know, I want you to be able to come back to this, so I want there to be enough text there for you to use. So sometimes that means like my slides are like too much text for the moment, but really I hope that future you appreciates that in a way that present you might not like that much. So I also wanted to note that I use Canva Magic Designer for slide design. I use that for, oh, please don't do that. I use that tool for layout and for graphics and sometimes for images. All the language, all the text, all of the arrangement, decision-making is mine. And I tell you that not just to be transparent about what I'm doing, but also to model something that you can do for your students or that you can ask your students to do for you in particular projects. So like I said, I wasn't envisioning this as a kind of workshop where we get down to brass tacks, but really I want to provide you with some information that comes out of our office from this year's worth of work. And hopefully that gets you thinking about like, ooh, maybe I need to address this differently, or, oh, I've got some ideas now about where I need to go with this, or, oh, I had no idea this might be going on in this particular way. I feel like maybe I have some things to think about. I also have another session next week with Kelly, who's right over there. It's Wednesday at this exact time, and we'll be talking much more nuts and bolts, like how do you develop syllabus language? How do you kind of articulate a philosophy or an approach to your courses, kind of thinking about AI? So I want to tell you stuff today, and I hope the stuff is useful to your thinking and productive for how you move into fall 2025. So just some like quick information about how AI is like expressed in the Academic Integrity Code. The simplest answer is that it's not. It is not explicitly expressed in the Academic Integrity Code. If you open the code and searched for generative AI, you would not find it. And part of that in spring 2023 was really annoying for us because we were like, it would be really cool if we could acknowledge that. But one thing about our code that is cool is that the concepts are kind of there. Generative AI use itself has not been prohibited by the university, and it will not be. Individual instructors have to make decisions about what's right for their pedagogy, for their classroom, for their situation. What the code does is give the guardrails for any work, including work that may include AI. So the code talks about plagiarism, and in particular, one of the components we define plagiarism, we include in the definition of plagiarism is misrepresentation, saying something comes from somewhere that it doesn't. Guess what sometimes happens when people use AI and don't validate or fact check the responses? Misrepresentation, right? Fabrication of data is also a violation described in the code. It's the falsification, fabrication, invention, distortion of data, which includes sources. Guess what? Sometimes that happens because someone's used AI and has accepted hallucinated work and submitted it as their own. So the issues are still the issues, whether they come from AI or they come from other kinds of behaviors or tools or practices that may not be advisable, right? So, and the last one up there is dishonesty in paper/exams. And this is the part of the code that says students are expected to submit their own work unless they've acknowledged otherwise. Work done by them, not work done by machines or other people, et cetera, et cetera. So these are the three parts of the code that we in our office apply when a faculty member calls and says, I've got a student who submitted a works cited page that has 3 citations that sure do look like real sources, but they sure are not. Fabrication sometimes, so they submit that as a case, it becomes a case, we investigate, we process. This is a code violation. It is a code violation to submit citations that don't represent any real sources. Fabrication of data. So that's how our code kind of applies to AI misuse. AI misuse on its own is not necessarily a code violation. Does that make sense? In the title for this session, it was a long title. I'll go back to it just to refresh. I asked ChatGPT to find research for me, then I asked Perplexity to write a paragraph for me, and other stories. So I want to highlight kind of the use of the word stories because we do hear a lot of stories from students, and I don't mean fiction, I mean just sort of the individual telling of things. The kind of qualitative data that gives us some insight about sort of how did this happen? Where did this come from? How are students approaching this? It may not be obvious to us. In fact, I am constantly surprised. Like, I think I know how students work, I do not. And so I think the stories that we hear in this process are important and instructive and informative as you develop materials. I think the data is important too, but my data always comes with like a lot of sort of disclaimers. The first being I'm a writer. And the second being I actually don't have a full set of data because the summer session's not over and I have cases that are pending. So I can't give you a complete set of data. But I'll tell you what I can, I'll tell you what I think is useful for you to know. So I'm deliberately not putting numbers on the screen for the reasons that I just mentioned, but I will tell you the numbers, which I have on the multiple devices that I'm toggling. So we saw 177 cases in the Office of Academic Integrity, 24-25. For those of you who have sort of participated in conversations about academic integrity before, you are probably like, what? That's a lot. That is a lot. Our office has only existed since July 2023, so I don't have apples to compare, too many apples to compare to these apples, right? But 23-24, we had 120 cases. There's a lot of caveats here, right? Like we were a new office, we were newly centralized, so it's sort of like, are people gonna report? We don't know. There's a lot of factors that kind of impact those numbers. So I don't think you should, hang on to those with a closed fist, right? But 177 is a lot. And I will tell you also that if I look at cases related to AI misuse, so when I say related to AI misuse, I'm saying stuff that has to do with fabrication of data that came from AI use. So I'm literally like going through my cases and saying, oh yeah, that was about that. Oh yeah, that was about that, right? Almost all of the fabrication of data cases are about come from AI hallucinations, right? Dishonesty in exams sometimes happens without being related to AI. I had my sister write my paper. Seen it. Plagiarism cases. There's a ton of plagiarism cases that have nothing to do with AI, right? I copy and pasted this from Wikipedia. Everybody's seen that, right? But when I look at the when I when I get really detailed in my look, with my blurry glasses, I can see that in 23-24, about 28% of cases were AI related, about 33 cases out of our 120 or so. And then in 24-25, 53%. So 93 out of 177, 53%. So like, wow, we doubled kinda our AI relatedness in our case distribution, right? The more shocking even to me, and it's not like a huge, more shocking to me is spring 2025, we had 105 cases, which is astounding for one semester. And 63 of them were AI related. So that's 60-ish% of cases in spring 2025. So the terrifying thing for me is like looking at the graph in my mind of these numbers, right? Whoa, the number of AI cases that are related to AI is going up so much that it's almost accounting for every single, like the number of just sort of straightforward, I copy and paste from Wikipedia, those numbers are staying kind of where they are, you know? We're not seeing as many other things. I will also give you one more caveat. We don't know what we don't know. So if somebody doesn't report a case, I don't know about it. If somebody handles something in another way, even if they're not supposed to, I don't know about it, right? If there's we have lots of consultations as well. So I will tell you that in addition to these numbers, we have a lot of consultations. So 177 cases, we're doing like 300 consultations in a semester. That means you call and you want to talk about it, and we do too, but it doesn't end up becoming a case. Carolyn?
Are the other cases going down? Or they're kind of, you suggested they're staying the same. Do we have less sisters writing papers?
So some are going down, some are not. Plagiarism is sort of staying pretty steady. They're still copy and pasting from Wikipedia. That's my shorthand for plagiarism, right? Yeah, there are fewer sisters writing papers, for sure.
Yeah, they're using AI instead of a human to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying this in some ways anecdotally, but I also think, I was asked earlier about Course Hero, and no one asked about it, but when I think of Course Hero, I think of chegg.com. Those of you who are in math or science, chemistry, biology. Yeah, it's like a student can submit their whole problem set and have the community of users give them answers. And our calculus team who designs brilliant word problems that are creative and wonderful get posted publicly. That's their intellectual property. Sometimes these sites will take that down because me, write to them with the stern official letterhead saying, take down our intellectual property or we're gonna sue you. But not, of course, Hero doesn't do that because they're like, but we're just like Uber. And that's kind of how they've been operating. Though the use of tools like that is going down. Look, how great. But it's going down because it's a lot easier and you don't need to subscribe to, you don't need to pay the monthly to Chegg or to Course Hero to like keep getting that. And likewise, the like bespoke essay writing, right? Like do my paper for hire, contract cheating is the way many of my colleagues talk about this, is also going down because I don't need to pay you $200 to write my paper. I can just use even a free generative AI tool to, to a student's perception, potentially get the same thing. Yes. So yeah, if I were to characterize the way these AI related cases kind of break down in terms of what the small issues are or what the like kind of granular issues are, citations look real, sources are not. Like you can't locate them. So you've got a bibliography and it looks legit, but then you click the link and the link is broken. Or you look at the journal title and you're like, that is a real journal. But then you go to the journal's website. This is where being able to use our library's search journals tool is really useful because you can put in the title of the journal and you can search for that issue, for that volume, for that page number, for that title, for that author, and it may not be there. And I feel like, Catherine, maybe you told me this, that there was an uptick in the number of people, including faculty, who were requesting material from the library that didn't exist, based on
Yes.
citations that
And that's
came.
nationwide,
Yes.
it's not just AU.
It's fascinating. Yes. This one in the middle, I think is interesting too. I think it's informative. Quoted text that doesn't appear in the source as it's expressed in the submitted work. So like you're looking at a paper and there's stuff in quotes, but it doesn't appear verbatim like that way in the source. It's like, whoa. I mean, I get that students are novices at summarizing, paraphrasing, quoting, right? But that's like one of the first things students learn in like middle school, even elementary school, about like stuff in quotes is the same as what it is in the source, right? How did this happen? Well, a really common practice, a lot of students are using AI for reading and summarizing. Summarizing is one of the top, like if you look at national surveys about how students are using AI, summarizing complicated texts. Our students are telling us, I use these tools to summarize the text, and I use it to pull out quotes that I can sprinkle in. And the sprinkling effect is not new, right? Anybody who's been looking at research papers for any amount of time knows that this sort of, I write my paper first, and then I go back and plug in the citations, which is like, please don't do that. Even in the most generous of process circumstances, right? Please don't do that. But this sort of like, I'm required to have sources, so I will go get sources and I will sprinkle them in, sources, right? AI has made that so easy to do. You can ask ChatGPT for citations for 5 sources about purple water bottles. And then you can write whatever your brain dumps out about purple water bottles and then just sprinkle in the 5 sources somewhere in there. This is very common.
Isn't it true that the latest version of ChatGPT hallucinates less when it comes to sources?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I do know
So
that.
does myself.
Repeat the question?
Yeah, what was the
It
question?
hallucinates less when it comes to citing sources than it used to. Less hallucination. I don't know if others have found this.
I don't know if there are fewer hallucinations. It's possible, right? Because every iteration of this tool is like better or working on getting rid of bugs or hallucinating less in general. I think that's one of the goals in every cycle, right? I was really surprised actually, I mean, in the spring, like the number of cases we're seeing, 56 cases in 2024-25 of fabrication of data. That doesn't sound to me like the hallucinations are fixed. But it also points to some of the things about our student users, right? In terms of prompting and in terms of validating, verifying, I think this points to like a huge realm of attention we can pay to certain things that maybe we still continue to do, but I think this reinvigorates conversations about the value of fact-checking, validation, and verification. Library colleagues have contributed to this in massive ways, thinking like a fact checker, which I'm quoting from Hannah Park. This is like, yes, think like a fact checker. This is a kind of habit of mind that we can use to sort of approach some of these problems. Also, really engaging with the concept of research. What is research? Why do we do it? What's the difference between sprinkling and engaging with research as a process? These are some of the things that we've heard from students. The professor never said anything about AI. This doesn't excuse issues. Like, I mean, okay, the door of the bank was left open. This is an old analogy from John. The door of the bank was left open, I went in and robbed it. No big deal, right? Okay, but as I would like you to put a statement on your syllabus. I would like everyone to have a statement on their syllabus that expresses the course's attitude towards, approach towards, disposition towards, policy about the use of generative AI in the class. And I think we're at the point now, last year, that would have ended the session. I would have been like, bye, have a good day. But now what I'm saying is like, that's actually not enough because things have changed, things are more complicated. I'll talk about that in a second. I mentioned the use of AI tools to summarize. I didn't know this was AI. This is one of the reasons things have changed this year. It's true that there may have been students saying I didn't know this was AI last year, but it's it is also true that AI power is behind a lot more tools. It's behind a lot more tools than we realize. The example that I always trudge out is Grammarly, which came out in 2009, but now is an AI-powered tool. Students don't always know that that's what's happening. They don't always know what that means. They don't always can't really identify the risks or potential detriments to engaging with something that is AI-powered. Am I saying that students never know what they're doing? I'm not saying exactly that, but I'm saying it's not quite enough to say, no, AI use is never allowed in this class. You will absolutely have an experience where a student submits something and is like, I had no idea that was AI. Because you weren't, I mean, I don't need to like shift that blame because that's not true, but you can tackle that, I think, by saying, you can't use in this class, it's not in this assignment, it's not permitted to use AI to do this, to do that. If you're used to using a particular tool and you're not sure if it's AI powered or not, please let me know and we can look at it together. And so a kind of like a curious approach rather than all instances of AI misuse in this class will be treated as plagiarism. I wouldn't leave it there. I think it's important to let students know that there are consequences to violations. There are consequences to misuse when clear instructions have been given. But I also think that approaching the question of sort of, is this AI powered or is it not, with curiosity is the way to go. I think it's more effective and I think it will open up more important conversations for students. And then this last one that's fuzzy because it's the title of the session. I use ChatGPT to find sources and I plug them in, but also the kind of, and then I use Perplexity and then I use Grammarly. One thing that I was really, it's not that surprising, but in the moment I was like, what? A student said, well, I use ChatGPT to brainstorm and then I use Perplexity to help me draft. And then I use Grammarly to clean it up. And then I use ChatGPT to put in the rubric and have it analyze my paper against the rubric and give me feedback. Then I revise, then I put it in Grammarly. And it's like, oh my God, you're at the laundromat. What is going on? I hadn't really considered that. In my mind, I was just sort of picturing a student like plugging away on one tool. But the fact that there is a kind of process and that students have ideas about which tools are good for which tasks that may or may not be true. I can't speak to that necessarily. I'm not an expert in each of these tools. And I recognize how overwhelming it must feel in the classroom to be like, oh my God, do I have to be an expert on all do I have to know all of these tools? That feels impossible. One of the things that I'm putting on our SharePoint site is link to LibGuide from UC San Diego that has like a pretty nice long list of different generative AI tools with a little description of what they do. And it's sort of like, oh, that would be great. So if a student came to you and was like, I usually use Blobbity-Blue for my papers, and you're like, I have no idea what that is, and I would like to be able to help guide you about using that, but how am I gonna figure it out? Maybe this is a link that has Blobbity-Blue listed there and you can read about it and check it and sort of see how it fits into your learning outcomes. Here's my washing machine, the laundromat. This was put together by Alexis, who works in my office. She works with students, sometimes with faculty, but she analyzes a lot of the textual material that comes into our office, and she does a lot of talking with students about what's going on. So some of the things she pointed out from looking through our caseload from the year was what we heard from faculty. So faculty want to report a case of AI generated text. Some of their reasons include things like discrepancies of citations and sources. There's no page numbers. There are claims that aren't substantiated by actual sources or the correct sources. The style and tone are inconsistent with what we've seen, what the student has generated in other projects, or is a different level of sophistication. That's what has happened in class. Oftentimes the cases we're putting together they're more straightforward when they involve fake sources, because that's work we can do. Like we can know, no, Allison Thomas didn't write about that time I played for the Boston Red Sox in this journal, right? Like I can verify that that did not happen, that article does not exist, right? But a lot of times when you're reading a student's paper, it's like a gut feeling. You're like, there is no way this student wrote this. I'm positive, right? You should still call. Like if you have that feeling and it's really bothering you, you really want to talk about it, you should still call us. But it's also true, to be completely transparent, sometimes there's not much we can do about it because we need more than a gut feeling to move forward. Our code obliges us to a certain evidentiary standard, which is clear and convincing. It's a high bar. It ensures due process for students. And so I have to be able to sit down in front of a student and say, we are concerned that this was produced by generative AI because. And it's gotta be something, right? So the style and tone of your work are different than what you submitted before. This work represents a different level of sophistication, right? But you can also see a student on the other side of that being like, so the professor doesn't think I'm smart enough to write this, right? And so these are not reasons to not call us or to not think you might have a case. I just think it's important for people to be aware and for you to know that I understand the frustration of that, certainly. Yeah.
Thanks. First, I want to say I have two kids, my own children, one who's in her 20s and one who's 18, who recently shared, like in one case a paper, in one case like a little quick paragraph for me to review and look at, and both of them, I'm like, you guys used AI for this. And my daughter, the older one, said, well, no, I just use Grammarly. So like I'm like, okay, let's sit and talk about this. And my son, the 18-year-old, was like, yeah, like obviously, what else would I use? So so I'm thinking about like what this looks like, and I really would like for this to be a non-litigious, non-punitive experience. I made a list as you were talking, because you used the word overwhelm a few times, and I feel like in the sessions that these AI sessions in the last couple of days, the word overwhelm keeps coming up, and it's on the student side.
Yeah.
Well, the one you just talked about is on the faculty side, right? We have to know all the AI tools that are out there. We have to know in advance, like how we want to address this in the classroom. We have to know how to prepare our students for tools that they probably know much more about than we do, et cetera. And then on the student side, they have to know how to like read a paper carefully. And, you know, academic writing, they have to know how to write, they have to know how to brainstorm, they have to know how to like cite properly and all this stuff. So I was wondering if you had thoughts on how to approach this in a way that isn't like, like I caught you, and because we're all like overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yes. I guess one thing that's worth mentioning is for those of you who are new, read the Academic Integrity Code. That's like always one of my bits of advice, which sounds like, but our code is not like other schools' codes. I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's so unique, but across higher education, the variety in these policies is huge. You may even, like from your own past, have experience where, oh, my school, they called it an honor code, or at the grad school I went to, it's different everywhere, and the policies will vary hugely. So read ours. One of the important things for faculty to know about ours in terms of your rights and responsibilities, you as a faculty member are not permitted to issue a grade penalty based on the perception that the code's been violated. So you can't say, you cheated on, sorry, I keep pointing to you. You cheated on that exam, I'm just gonna give you an F on it, we're gonna call it a day. Can't do it. Part of that is because our code guarantees a student due process, they get to participate, they get to respond. They get to have that process live in a space that's outside of their classroom and outside of their faculty members' purview in a lot of ways. For faculty members, some faculty think they want more involvement in that. And I kind of chuckle a little because it's sort of like, the faculty who've had these experiences are sort of like, thank you so much for taking this off my hands. Because it's really time consuming. If you've had academic integrity issues before in your classes, you know, like, it feels kind of bad. Like, I would say, don't take it personally, but I also understand, I've been there. I feel like very bad if the student does like plagiarizes something or whatever in my class. I'm like, ugh, and there's no way I can respond to that without those feelings at work. So if you're inclined to penalize something, you must submit it to us. We issue penalties if there are any to be issued after a review. Is the student responsible? Yes or no? If they are, what is an outcome that is sort of commensurate, consistent in process and in outcome with what happens in other cases, right? But in the moment, you might be like, ooh, this is a first year student and they wrote something and I feel like maybe they don't know what's going on here. I want to have a talk with this person. Or I feel like this person needs some conversation about skill X, Y, or Z. I think there's a real teaching opportunity here. Our code says faculty can decide, because faculty are the teachers, right? Can decide where the teaching moment happens. It can happen with you without penalty, or it can happen with me, potentially with penalty, right? If it happens with you, then my advice to faculty in that context is sit down with the student. Point out what the issues are, connect it to the academic integrity code. I'm not accusing you of anything right now, but I'm saying you are held accountable to this code and you're kind of risking running afoul of it right now. I want to give you a chance to remedy this situation. I'm going to point out skills, concepts, ideas, ways to practice this that will help you avoid this in the future. Take what I've just taught you and have another chance at this. Submit it to me by this day, by this time, and here's what happens if I don't get it. That's a teaching moment. And no penalty can be applied to the submitted work, even a late penalty. If a penalty is applied based on the perception the code's been violated, you're subject to a grade grievance. And then it just comes back through me, but from another direction. So, and we can help you work through that too. So if you're sort of like, I'd really like to execute a meaningful teaching moment here, but I need some help talking it through. Yes, those are our best conversations. Our assistant director, our new assistant director is Stina Oakes. She's an awesome teacher. She's a wonderful person to talk to about these questions. She's a good mentor. She's a really experienced teacher. So I encourage you, like if that's the way you're leaning, don't not call us because you're like, I don't want to get the student in trouble. That's not a reason to ignore something. And you probably could use a little support working through it. So don't be afraid to get it.
Sorry, just to clarify, so you also take non-litigious paths with students?
Our office is the zone where if you're inclined to penalize it, if you're like, this is an issue, there's no way I can grade this without accounting for what I perceive to be plagiarism, let's say, then you have to submit it to us and we decide what the penalty is based on consistency with everything else that we know about. You also don't know, remember this too, you also don't know if the student does this in every class. And I'm not saying I always know that, but if there are multiple cases that the student has been through, you will not know that. I will know that. Even like department chairs don't know that, associate deans don't always have that information. And so sometimes like deciding, oh, this is gonna be a teaching moment, like where is the teaching? Because remember that teaching does happen from like, that's uncomfortable. Failing a class or failing an assignment is uncomfortable, it's bad, nobody wants to do that, but that's a teaching, that teaches something too, right? But you can think about where that teaching goes. Deciding on a teaching moment because you feel bad for the student, or because you think the penalty is gonna be too severe, or because you really like the student, or the student reminds you of yourself. Right now I'm getting into sort of like, oh, there's some bias territory here to be aware of, right? Those are not reasons. The student cried, not a good reason for a teaching moment. I identified that the student, it's reasonable that the student didn't know how to do this better. I think I can help the student learn this if I take this approach. That's the rationale that I would say should direct the decision about teaching moments. I wanted to point out some of these observations that maybe I've mentioned already, but just to get them in one place. So students are regular users of multiple generative AI tools. They're often using multiple tools to complete a single thing. They have ideas about what tools are good at what tasks. This one's really interesting to me also because for a long time I've studied and thought about information literacy, and if you are familiar with the American College and Research Library's information literacy framework, they use this idea of dispositions, that like we have an approach to something, we have a behavior towards something when it comes to information seeking, right? And I feel like I started talking about this with students a long time ago, like how do you approach Google? What do you do when you Google something? What are you thinking about? Like, and they're sort of like, oh, well, I put in a sentence, or I ask a full question and put a question mark at the end, and I expect the results to be in the first 2 or 3 things. I don't scroll down the page or go to page 2. Those are behaviors, those are dispositions towards something, right? And what I noticed in talking to a lot of students over the past year, not just from cases, but I do a lot of like workshops and visits to classes and student groups and stuff like that, is that a lot of students are approaching ChatGPT and AI tools with the same disposition they use to approach Google. And they're not the same thing. So like they sort of think Google and ChatGPT are kind of the same thing. They're not the same thing, right? They work in different ways, in key ways that might determine some decision-making about using them, right? But that they take the same approach towards those tools was really interesting to me, and I'm still kind of working out how that should inform what we're doing. But I think at the most basic level, talking to students about what these tools are and what they're not is actually really useful for them at this.
In fairness, Alison, Google has now added an AI mode.
Well, and yeah, and it's right at the top, right? And so, and there's been a lot of conversation about how that's sort of like denigrating the old-timey Google results, right? And so
Summarizing Google.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think a lot of, even though it says like AI-powered results, like, I don't think our students are really thinking about it that way. And so we have gotten cases where a student is using material from the AI summary and they're like, no, I just Googled it. And so this is again instructive about sort of like, students are not really thinking about thinking. Like they're not really thinking about what tools they're using and why, what the implications of those tools are, right? And so my advice, like big picture, is if your class allows the use of AI for any reasons, I would say, yeah, okay, use this as a tool, but also let's consider this as an object to sort of study, to interrogate, to question, to think critically about. Yeah, okay, if you want to use this as a tool, but are you aware of what the risks are, what the impact is? Many of our students have expressed to me some frustration at about environmental implications, and in particular, like the amount of water and energy that data centers that handle AI are using, and the environmental impact on specific communities of this. And they don't feel like those have been fully considered. And in some ways I'm like, same. I mean, there's not a ton of mainstream reporting about those issues. The hype is so much bigger. And so I think students want to engage on those topics. I don't know how long we have on that interest. I do think there may be a fatigue coming because, I mean, I'm telling all faculty right now, like, have conversations about this with your students, right? Maybe in January, I'll be saying, okay, students are really tired of having these kinds of conversations. We're gonna have to regroup and figure out where we go from here, you know? But I think for now, I wouldn't let students loose on these tools without having a meaningful conversation about what they do, how they do it, what the implications are, and like what the decision-making might look like for them. I also think there should be, or it's worth thinking about what an opt-out might look like in a course where you're like, I've got an assignment that requires students to use AI for something. This happened to me this summer. I was teaching a writing class online, and I assigned students a project, and then the first part of the second assignment was, now get AI to do this project. And the second part of the assignment was, and write an op-ed in the Eagle or the Chronicle of Higher Education with advice based on what you learned from like the work that you did versus the work that the tool produced. And I said, because we'd done a couple of readings about what is AI, how does it work, and so students had explored these questions, and so I had 2 students who said, I don't want to use AI because of the environmental impact. And we were meeting as an online class, so we were meeting, and she shared her screen with me, and I saw her little green Grammarly. And I was like, I'm not judging, but what is that green bubble on your screen? She's like, that's my Grammarly. And I was like, and before that she said, I'm opposed to AI. I don't use AI for anything. Sorry, I really buried that. And I was like, just so you know, a lot of the things Grammarly does now are AI powered, right? And she was like, what? I'm gonna delete it right now, you know? And so obviously this is also a reminder that sometimes our students like hook onto an idea and they're like, and now this is me, you know? When the conversations could continue. And that's not to say I'm against her decision or her reasons, but sometimes students will like decide on something and then stop investigating it or stop thinking about, you know, the other sort of bits of it. And so in my assignment, I was sort of like, well, that's actually fine. I mean, you can still write an op-ed for the Eagle or for the Chronicle of Higher Education about why you opted out, how hard it was to opt out. Do you feel like you could have done this in other class? Like there's lots of different ways you could go. And so if there are AI kind of focused assignments, maybe there's a way to allow students to kind of get to the same learning outcomes without having them do something that they feel uncomfortable about. And then source sprinkling, alive and well right now, cite later. Reading complicated texts, it's challenging. Lack of preparation, lack of confidence, and this gets at another really interesting thing that I feel like came up in conversations I had with students. Students feel, I've heard students express that they have a sense of trust in AI tools. And in a recent conversation in the New York Times, Jessica Gross and Tressie McMillan-Cottom talked about the sort of relational aspect of education, and that one of the reasons why students gravitate towards AI as tutor is because it kind of mimics a relationality that we associate, you know, that comes from learning, right? Or that happens when we learn. And so there's that. There's the like, I don't feel judged when I go to use this tool. But there's the like, the machine is neutral. Which I just, that was just such a, I was like, whoa, oh my gosh, I need to like chew on that for a minute. This notion that the machine is objective, humans are biased and machines are objective and neutral. And so I'd rather have a neutral thing tell me the stuff. And so I feel like that's like head exploding, but also something we can do something about, right? I mean, like, I don't know, I feel like students have been using the term bias incorrectly since I started teaching, right? And so there's that. But also, to understand that the machine is not neutral means like, oh, if you're gonna use this tool, I would like to know, what are the biases that are behind it? Can you do some research on that, or can you figure that out? Or what do you notice about the biases? One of our colleagues in, I think she's in art history, this is from last year, she gave an assignment about a particular period of Chinese art. And she asked students to take a summary of that period from ChatGPT and identify the Western biases that appeared in that output. It's like, oh, okay, now you're teaching students how to identify biases. That's another thing that they've always struggled with. And so it's sort of like, how can we involve some kind of meta literacy here in a way that allows students to not just use the tool, but to interrogate the tool. I don't even need text, and like, you know, we're not alone. I mean, if you like, you're at a university, people you know probably email you 100 links a day about like the collapse of higher education and the AIification of everything, and the bots are taking over. I don't know, maybe that's just my inbox, but I really don't get any other email than that. But that's to say, no, we're not alone in this. If you asked me, this may, I guess this obviously be biased, but I don't know. I think this is like in the top 5 issues existentially for higher education right now. I might even push it into like the top 3. We're not alone in this. How are other people tackling it? In the slow way that universities tackle things, right? And so conversations like this, workshops like this, opportunities like this to talk to each other and to share, I think it is the way through. I will also refer again to the conversation between Jessica Gross and Chessie McMillan-Katam, where she says, Chessie McMillan-Katam says, essentially that what I really believe to be true and have been saying, which is like, we actually are the most equipped. It's like, we teachers are the most equipped and the most necessary and the most, this is the ultimate kind of step up to your jobs now, right? Like, our jobs are not going anywhere because our jobs are the most necessary right now. Whether or not our culture, our society, our communities are ready to make that investment is another thing, but that's work that we do, right? So I think that there's an overwhelm there. I think the biggest overwhelm for faculty isn't so much I need to know all the AI tools or I need to submit an academic integrity case. It's, are you telling me I need to turn my teaching materials upside down? And I've I waffle on that because nobody wants to be like, yes, you do. That's bye, workshop over, you know, that's terrible. But the answer is kind of yeah. But the good news is like, you know how to do that. I'm sure you've done that before, right? But like, I mean, we did it, we all did it during the pandemic pretty well, I would say. But this is what it means to be a teacher in many ways. Like you do it on the day-to-day. It's just sort of tapping into that. I don't mean to be like, oh, Pollyanna about it, but this what saves me from the dark places, you know what I mean?
Is it okay to ask questions or comment? Yeah. I just wanted to reinforce what you said about professors. There was that article in the Post that showed the AI jobs that are, the jobs that are not gonna get replaced by AI, and professors were like right in there with the ones that are not. And I also think that, you know, the idea of stretching us to be creative is something that probably we all got into because of teaching. And I think that that's something that the idea of finding the limits of AI, especially with young people who are developing skills and thinking skills and like learning those limits, I think it's a developmental thing for us too, you know, and that is scary, but at the same time, like it's gonna make us better teachers. It's a tool. So it's gonna make things better ultimately if we figure out the limits and don't think of it as unlimited, because it is not human. It has limits. Yeah. And so like finding those limits, right, is the most important thing. And it's really not like any other tool use in history, because there's always been that, you know? Yeah. Anyway, so that's, I wanted to corroborate your point about professors, you know?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I certainly think so too. I also think another my my nerd crush, Trustee McMillan, called AI technology mid in one of her articles like a week ago or so, and that like exploded the conversation sphere about this. And to your point about sort of it's not human, is it a general purpose technology? Is this the first time we've seen something like this? I've spent a while, I mean, since spring 2023, thinking academic integrity wise, there's not a lot that's actually new here, big picture. But the stuff is different, and the stuff is faster, and the stuff is bigger. But like it's the same, like what could be the only question people asked me when I first started doing academic integrity work, and it continues, why do students cheat? There's a podcast that I'll post on the SharePoint site that's with Trisha Bertram-Gallant, who's another nerd crush. She's at University of California, San Diego. And Jim Lang, who's been doing this work for a while. He's at Notre Dame. And they, she talked about this a little bit. I just lost my train of thought, sorry.
Why they cheat?
Oh yeah, why they cheat? Oh yeah, big one. Okay, sorry. And she was like, because they're human, which when I heard that on the podcast, I was like, gosh, what a cop out, you know? But for me, like my answer to that question is sort of like, well, there's a lot of reasons. Like sometimes it's, I ran out of time. Sometimes it's, I'm really stressed. Sometimes I didn't really know that was an issue. Sometimes everybody else is doing it and I don't want to be the one that fails while everybody else gets a fabricated A or whatever. Sometimes it's clumsiness. Sometimes it's, they never taught me this in high school, or they never taught, or I've been out of school for a number of years, or I was educated in a different system where research was accounted for differently, or whatever. And so I feel like there's a number of reasons. It's not just one. It's definitely not you're a bad person. And that's kind of where a lot of like cheating conversations have lingered for a really long time. Like this is a moral failing. This is, and that gets in the way a lot of the conversations that I can have with students. The first thing students say to, this is not who I am. Which is like a really heartbreaking thing to hear from, you know, an 18 to 20, this is not who I am. This is not what I'm about. This doesn't represent me, right? And so I think those are like important things to remember. The question is a little bit bigger.
I wanted to also be a Pollyanna with you about, we surveyed COGOT students again in April, a year into our big push for AI. And there's a significant minority of students that worry about their own thinking and what they're paying for college for.
Yes.
And so this conversation about limiting AI and using it as a tool and not an everything, and really asking them to think about what they want from their education, from what they want from this class, and tapping into something really old-fashioned, which is about their motivation.
Yes.
The two students that collated all of the information from our survey then had like 6 recommendations. And one of them was limiting and scaffolding AI use in the first year.
Yes.
Letting students kind of figure out, why am I in college? What do I want to learn? What might I major in? What interests me about it? And definitely feeding that into their own motivation of whether or not. And some of them already said, it's so easy and it's so good that I already feel my learning is slipping away.
Yes.
And I think that's a really interesting thing for us as teachers and mentors and cheerleaders to try to tap into.
Yes.
With our students.
I think that that's really interesting in a million ways, Karan, but one thing that gets me thinking about is how many of our students have lived multiple lives of this already, right? Like for many faculty, it's sort of like this linear thing, like AI came onto the scene. Do I have to pay attention to this? Is this a big deal? Oh, I think it is. I'm gonna learn about it. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna do this, right? It's kind of like right? But a lot of our students are sort of like this. Like, it's awesome. Oh no, it's awesome. It's bad. Oh no. And like, I've heard from students who are already in the kind of, I was addicted and now I'm off, I'm not. I had to
Really?
wean myself off of, like, so they've already sort of lived this whole life of like, I got interested in AI and I thought it was great and I was using it responsibly, and then I felt it myself slipping, or I felt my own ideas kind of slipping away, or my own skills or talents ebbing in some way, so I kind of tried to get off of it, and then I realized, oh, I'm in way deeper than I thought, or I like it more, or I'm used to using it more than I thought. I'm back, you know, and so like this idea of like sort of addiction, I don't want to use that metaphor.
Reliance.
But
No,
reliance.
that's why your second bullet point there is really the whole banana. That's it.
Yeah.
It's helping them to have that conversation with us, with librarians,
And
with
the guardrails.
themselves.
I think there's a lot of times where students at this developmental age sort of like need some guardrails. Like save me from myself. And this is happening in a lot of the scholarship too about tutoring, right? Like our students and Titan Partners puts out a time for class survey every year, and it's about sort of digital trends and what students are doing in digital spaces. And one of their insights was sort of students are saying things like, I want in-person classes, I want in-person tutoring, I want in-person opportunities. But the same set of data shows us that online appointments are up at this or that. Online classes are still being filled. Like they want human interaction, but are choosing online interaction. And so here's our opportunity to step in and like, Anna, I feel like you and I have talked about this about workshops too. It's like, we're in person. This is the first set of workshops I've done where like we've had to be in person, and that's challenging. It means some people can't make it, or we'll have a smaller group or whatever. But we have to have some, there's some guardrails there. There's some guardrail like this, we think this is the better format, right? And so as teachers, as the people who are sort of guiding the classroom, I feel like students can use that from us.
The biggest problem I have is with assignments. I can't think of any take-home assignment that is cheat-proof.
Yep.
That cannot be use a shortcut using AI.
Yep.
So the implication is much of the assignments have to be in the class. And I wonder, have you noticed a trend, for example, back to using blue books?
Yes, a couple of things about that.
Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, so the question is about whether the how easy it is to use generative AI to do any kind of take-home assignments, and has that kind of maybe translated into
You can't make them cheat-proof.
Yeah.
Any possible
And has that meant a return to like in-class work, blue books? Yes, definitely more in-class work. Yes, blue books. I definitely hear from a lot of faculty who are like, well, we're going back to handwritten everything. And I'm sort of like, okay, well, there may be some accommodations you have to account for because not every student, right? That changes things a little bit, right, Anna?
Yeah, I actually use Respond as Lockdown for my quizzes now, but and I give a handwritten option, and most students prefer writing the exams, believe it or not. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Having both options is nice. Yeah, the Respond is we have the Lockdown browser, which just stops a student on that device from opening any other windows. But of course, like if they're doing it at home or not in a class, right, then it's, I mean, I have 3 devices right here, you know? So there's that. I think cheat proof is a mountain I would walk around. Like, don't try to climb that mountain. I don't think there's any AI proofing to be done. I think that the address to this is more like, okay, let's emphasize the learning outcomes. Like, if you use AI to do this, okay, but here's what you'll gain and here's what you'll lose. Or get students to say that. Does this seem like an assignment where AI would be helpful or harmful? What does that look like? Would this be appropriate? And also where they have to be in conversation with each other, where they have to talk about their ideas out loud to you or to a TA or to other students in the class, presentations, those have become common. I think I like those ideas. I guess I won't say I like those ideas better. I will say my advice is always don't go to Blue Books because you want to cheat proof something. Go to Blue Books because it makes sense for your learning outcomes. Right? Like, don't choose to have students do a presentation because you're like, this seems like it will stop them from cheating. think about how a presentation might actually be a meaningful opportunity to achieve a learning outcome in the class. And in this way, I actually think that some of these questions overlap with like universal design philosophy, right? Like, why does this assessment have to be this way? Why does it have to be writing? Why does it have to be visual? Why does it have to be spoken? Like, does it have to be? And I feel like those are a little scary questions to ask, because sometimes you're like, I've been teaching this for 7 years, this idea for 7 years. Oh, it doesn't actually have, turns out, it doesn't actually have to be that way, right? Maybe it could be something else. And so I think open-mindedness to that is another thing. One other thing that I've heard from faculty, there are a couple of like little, like tiny little things that I think are useful that I've heard from faculty. One is my colleague in the writing program, Kate Wilson, she's done this for a long time as part of her like information literacy instruction. She asks students to submit, back in the day, it was like a paper copy of the first page of every research article they used. But now she has them put together like a PDF. It's just the first page of every research article you used. She doesn't have a lot of fabrication of sources because they have to get the PDF and then so sprinkling, sure, but fabrication, less, okay. And then, what was the other one I was thinking about? That was one I hate to use the word worksheet, but a colleague of mine, I can't remember what department she was in, she's talking about how she had like a chart compare, I think it was the literature department actually, she's like asking students to compare characters or characters' experiences in a book, and it was just sort of like fill in these bubbles, right? And work together, talk with each other to fill in these bubbles. You can't fill in the bubbles if you haven't read the book. You can't fill in the bubbles if you're working off an AI summary, right? And the students, she contacted me because she was like, these students submitted a paper earlier in the semester that was really good, but they all submitted a blank worksheet. And I heard them not talking about the book. Like they could not talk about the book. And it's like, ugh. They probably used AI when they submitted that paper, but the worksheet is what really tripped them up. And so I think what's instructive about that is not, hooray, assign more worksheets. It's what are the things that force students into the sort of like, if they can't be done by a machine, like with the human things.
But why can't the machine fill in the cells in the worksheet? I don't understand. Unless it's in the classroom, I suppose.
It was done, yeah, it was done in the classroom, but it was, the nature of it was kind of like, what do you think about how this character responds to trauma or something like that? And it's sort of like they couldn't, at least those students could not figure out how to use the AI. I mean, I'm sure AI tools could be capable of doing that work with a little nuance and finesse in the prompting. Those students in her situation could not. So, I mean, again, I guess that also makes the point. There's no such thing as AI proofing. But transparency, discussions, and encouraging kind of disclosure about what tools are happening.
I'm sorry to interrupt that. I was here late. I'm Gemma. I'm in the SOC, and I just got back about 2 weeks ago. the Newhouse School of Communications at Syracuse had an AI conference, and they invited certain people on. I hate AI. I don't know why they invited me. And I said to her, I'm not the person you want because I never use AI, and I don't want my students to use AI. And she goes, well, no, you're perfect because we want somebody like you who's very skittish about using AI. But I paired it with one of my former students who's an adjunct here, who also is just really quickly, he works in the PR industry. And it was eye-opening. And what I saw and what I heard is AI is here. It is here. And some people did a report and they showed it, and that is that I think a group of CEOs did an opinion piece in the New York Times encouraging businesses to accelerate AI. The Ohio State University is mandatory that all students have to learn AI. The state of Ohio has now issued that all K-12 students, K-12, have to learn AI in their curriculum. And what is, and I hear, because again, I'm kind of skittish in terms of having everything AI, but, you know, Anthony, who was with me, said, Gemma, this is where we're going. Our, you know, in journalism and in PR, there will not be jobs because AI is taking over, but they're also teaching their employees to learn AI. And he has gone to every single person and said, you need to learn AI. And some of them have said, Anthony, I don't want to learn. And he said, okay, I just want to let you know that in 6 months, you may not have a job. So it was just an eye opener. And I know the challenge is, how do we, you know, use AI in assignments and in our classroom, but also to make sure that the entire student, I mean, all the class, doesn't use it for everything. And I think that's a really good discussion. But I just wanted to say that this is where we're seeing it. In the next few years, everyone's going to know how to use AI. Students are going to know how to use AI as little as they are to know, because that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
That's where CEOs are asking for it. States, the educational system's asking for it, and it's where we're headed.
I want to make the distinction, thank you for that comment. I want to make the distinction between, and I think one of the ways through this conversation and some of the challenges that you're getting at, like the distinction between using AI and learning about AI, right. AI literacy are different, right? And I think that's where we owe our students.
Yes.
There's one aspect of AI that we haven't really talked about, and that is, what are the students actually searching when they ask for something with AI? And I think that's really important because a lot of the material that was deposited into these large language models was stolen from academics, stolen from great writers, and we have no idea how accurate it is. When I took my first programming class, it was a basic class. In 1973, the professor came in the first day and wrote on the board, G-I-G-O. What does that mean? Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So
that was
whenever
the title
your
of one of my
AI
students'
can be as clever programming, but if what they're searching is garbage, you're going to get garbage back.
Yes.
And also, it's really, there are lawsuits that are percolating right now because of the stolen works that were deposited in those LLMs.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems of the sort of like Google disposition approach. Like they're searching the way they search on Google without really realizing kind of how those tools are different.